Hello, my name is Graja, and I just did a web MVC with Hibernate in Spring project. So this is basically that project, except I had a lot of code. It's probably really hard to follow along. So this is cleaned up, and as you can see here, there's just a login. So inspect, and go to resources, and I'm going to show cookies. So there's that, and if I log in here, so say I added a cookie, and that just allows so next time I come on here, it will check for the cookie. If the cookie's there, the user doesn't have to log in, so it just keeps them logged in. Alright, so I'm just going to enter some random data here. You can see here, over here, the last one that looks like it was entered was 4. So on my database, I'm just going to enter some random data, submit, and it'll auto generate 5, and that's the data that I just entered for that test object, which is just a name, first name, last name, and it has an ID. So over here you can see the database table, test ID. Well, obviously I gotta refresh this, so what I'm gonna do is run this. That runs this SQL right here, and then it updates the table. So you can see the one I just entered, 5, and some random data, and that's pretty much all it does. So yeah, I'll go over the code real quickly. So alright, so the web initializer, all Java config. I got, yeah, so abstract annotation, config dispatcher, servlet initializer, and then you got to implement the these methods. So you can add the root config class for the root config, and the servlet. I refer to this as the dispatcher. So you can have your servlet config here, and as you can see here, servlet dispatcher. So this is the root context, and this is the dispatcher servlet. Yeah, I'm not a professional, but yeah, correct me if I'm wrong in the comments. No, that's what it's all about, learning and getting better. So servlet mapping, I use the / for the root, and so let's check out the dispatcher. So dispatcher, this is what I have here. Oh wait, wrong. See, that's the servlet config. That's what I want. Okay. So the servlet config, I have here's the servlet config. So configuration. Here's all my imports, configuration, enable web MVC, import the controllers package, which I have a few controllers. I'll actually show that. Yep, here it is. And so I have a business where I have test and test object and user object. I have a DataConfig, root config, servlet config, web initializer for the configuration. The controls, I have a dispatcher, a login controller, and a test controller. And the I have a, this is like the DAO, data access object. Use the Hibernate Test repository. So over here, this extends web MVC configurator adapter. This right here is the view control resolver, view resolver, and that's the internal resource view resolver. Again, I don't know if I mentioned this, but everything is Java configuration, so you'll probably recognize most of this from XML configuration. So yeah, this is the internal resource view resolver. This is the prefix I have, and this is the suffix, and I have expose context beans has attributes set to true. So that's how I set up my view resolver. And then we override the add resources handler and the config default servlet handling. So this just sets configure to enable, and this is the resources, which you want this to point to your resources. And so that's what this is for, and I'll show the resources that I have. You can see the webinf here. So I have inside that root directory of the webinf, I have, oh wait, not the webinf actually, inside the root directory of web pages. So let me close that. Okay, there. So it will go to, so as you can see here, the webinf views, as you can see the /, so it goes here, and that's how it gets the views. And for the resources, it has the basically the it will go to this resources folder, and then I have CSS in here, so that's how I get the CSS. That's it for the dispatcher servlet configuration. I'll go on to the root configuration, and what I do here is I got add configuration, and then I actually import the data configuration class that way, and I have component scan for the Hibernate Test repository, which is a data access object. I'm going to go to the data configuration. Alright, so I went over these. I'll get rid of that. Alright, the data configuration. So I wanted to show this real quick. The transaction manager, I don't use this for this application. Maybe in the future, but I don't have that. And so all I have for my data configuration, going to get rid of that import up there. So these are the imports I have, and don't need this. This was JPA, as you can see by the, probably figure out by the notation. I enable JPA repositories, so that's not used for this application. I have the data source and the session factory. That's it for this class. So real quick, the basic data source, this one is a connection pool. So I have MySQL for the class name, driver class name, the driver. So set URL, here's the URL. I'm using the localhost, and Hibernate DB is the name of my database. Set username. I just have root and nothing for a password for my local host. So that's the data source. You can see this bean annotation here. You don't need this name. I like to explicitly add the name, although this would be sufficient. It will implicitly name the bean whatever this method name is. Autowired takes the data source and puts it here. That's what the autowired annotation is for. And yeah, again, so another bean for the session factory, which I'll be using autowired to inject into the Hibernate Test repository, my data access object, and I'll be using that to persist my data. So yeah, it's just a session factory object there. The Hibernate dialect. So if you've configured Hibernate with XML, this is the equivalent with Java configuration. Properties, Hibernate, as you can see, create properties, and I call the Hibernate properties, new properties, and then set property. So I have the dialect, show SQL, true, and then I like to use the update for my HBM to DDL auto, and I have ID new generator mapping set to false. Local session factory builder, create a new local session factory builder, and then for the constructor it takes the data source. So add annotation class, test class. I just wanted to add one class. You can add packages as well with set packages. I'm sorry, scan packages, I think it is. And add properties. This is what you want to look out for. This caused me a lot of trouble. There's a set properties and the add properties, and I could not get it to work. And I'm pretty sure that was the reason the whole time, was because I had it for set properties. So if you're not aware of that, be mindful of that. So Hibernate properties, I just set the add properties. I don't set it, I add properties that I just created and set over here. So, and then session factory builder, build a session factory, and that will return a session factory. So we now have our session factory, and that's it, the data source and the session factory. For the Hibernate, all set. That's all I have for the DataConfig. So I'll close that. Yes, sure. So I'll go into the Hibernate Test repository, and let's see. It looks like I have some things here to clean up. Okay, this is my imports. I have at repository. I typically use this for data classes or persistence layer classes. Hibernate Test repository. I have a session factory and a session. So I auto-wired the bean, the session factory here, and when this is created, so I store the session factory here, and I also create a session from that session factory. I open a session, then I store that there. So that's all I do there, and then I have one method to basically insert, and that's save. The save. So what I do is when I call this, I just pass an object, and then I use the session, get transaction, begin, and then I save the object that I pass in here, or I persist it, and then I get the transaction and I commit, and that's how I save to the database. So I just call this method. I use this repository object, and I call the save method, and then run this code. So that persists the object to the database for me. And I have getters and setters, so you can get sessions, or in this case, you probably might want to close a session and session factory. So I have setters and getters, so you can write code and logic for that type of operation. I don't really go into too much detail for that. I just persist the object to the database with this method, and that's pretty much it. I don't I don't close any sessions or the factory for this application, probably in a future application. But for this, the purposes of this application, that's all I do. As you saw, what it does, it just adds information to the database. Very simple. So I'm going to close this. And so we got that. It looks like just controllers and the objects. So we'll start with what happens when the application first gets called. This is the dispatcher, and this is the get. So your basic index, you usually have like an index HTML or JSP or something that gets called. So that's why I called this index. And when it first gets called, it checks the if the client has that cookie that you saw me install, so that it will decide if they need to log in, or if the cookie's there, then they don't have to log in. They can go right to the home page. So that's all this does. Get cookie in session, so get the cookies, and that's an array of cookies. I have a string cookie name, which is a user ID cookie, and that's the cookie that I install. and the value is currently set to empty string. And then I get the session. I just wanted to create a session as well. Don't really need the session for this, but I was working with sessions and cookies and at the time when I wrote this code, so I wanted to also add a session. Boolean cookie exists equals false, so that's, like I said, it's going to check if the cookie's there or not to decide what page to show. And cookie, so for each cookie in the array, if the name equals the cookie name, so I'm looking for a cookie that is stored by this name, and then it will, if there is, then it will get that value. And then I have a session which I added the cookie to the session, and I have a user object, very simple user object. I didn't want to bother with the database for users since it's just for testing. I just have created a user object, and it's test user, test password. So request attribute, the user object sets that to the request, and so I can use that. I did this. I wanted to basically, I was thinking like have a lot of web pages have like a login. You can log out and it'll say like welcome and username. So that's why I had this, but I don't use it. But yeah, just so you have an idea, yeah, you can do that, something like that if you want to. That's what I was thinking when I wrote this. Cookie exists equals true. So basically all this does, yeah, like I said, get the cookie. If the cookie exists, then yeah, true. And then we know that we can send them right to the home page view over here. As you can see, string view equals if cookies exist, it will send them to the home page. If not, it will send them to a login page, and then pass that view back. So that's what this controller does. And that's it. So that's the dispatcher controller. So it's going to go to either the login. So let's go to the login. I didn't have the login page here. And I can't find my views for some reason. Oh, okay, because that's closed. Alright, so the login, I have just, you know, well, not simple, but okay, it's a JSP, it's got the standard tag library, and I use the CURL for the resources, and that uses the add resources handler that I showed in dispatcher servlet configuration. So that's how that works, and that points to my resources here to get my CSS. So I have this error message, which I'll show in the login controller. Yes, I'll show in the login controller. So yeah, that's it. You saw the login when I log in, and obviously if they put the wrong information, it will show an error message, you know, invalid information. And so if I could find the form action login, okay, so that calls the login controller. I'll close that, and the login controller, so /login, and it's a post, and this takes a request and a response, passes back a model and a view, or a model and view object. So I create the model here, the view here, or variables for the model and view. Check database for users. So like I said, I just set the user like this. I don't have it on a database. I didn't go to the table and get it, but that's how you would typically do it. So get user login information here, and this is the parameters passed in when I entered the information on the login screen, and then hit submit, and it will come here, and I get this information from those text fields. Check for the user match. So the user from the data. This just matches this information with information from the database, which would have the users, but over here I just have created one and match it with this. So for simplicity of the application. And so it will go in here, and if there's a match, it will go in here, and then I have this cookie. So if they logged in, we want to keep them logged in, so we create a cookie. Like I said, I call it the user ID cookie, as I showed when it gets installed on the client, and it just passes the username for the value, and then over here I set the time for 1 year, just to keep them logged in. And I was going to add like a logout feature, but yeah, this is just very basic, simple application for testing primarily Hibernate, but I did a few other things. So here's the path for the cookie, which will give access to the roots, and a response. This adds the cookie to the client browser, and model error message clears error message. And it will set the view to home. Otherwise, if there was no match, then invalid information for the error message, and it will take them back to the login screen instead. So, and then pass back the monolith view. So that's the login controller. So let's say they went through the login process. Now we'll go to the home page, and so the home page is the basically the same thing up here. With the JSP, it's got the JS TL tag library, and I use the CURL to get my CSS. It's just the header, and over here is why you saw the object. I passed the object back, and you can see the test ID, first name and last name of the test object. And I'll go over that real quick here. When I start the application, I have update, so if the table doesn't exist, Hibernate actually creates the table in the database for me. I actually didn't show that this time. I showed that in the last video. Yeah, I can probably show that. Let me see. I'll go to tables, delete this, or delete. Yes. Okay, so it's deleted, and I'll run my application, and it should create this table as you see it. So yeah, so it will have test ID. These will be the names of the columns. So I specify the names of the columns. I think it will use the variables if you don't. And I wanted to, so I like to specify the names of the columns like that. Alright, so I started my application, and it started. So I'll refresh tables, and as you can see, I created the test table again, and I'll view data, and you can see it's empty. And there you go, it generated a 1, and this data here. So I'll show over here, and 1, and that data isn't in the HANA database, so it's pretty cool. Yeah. So ID is pretty much means it's a primary key, and generated value is like auto increment on the MySQL. You can specify strategy with this. There's more. You can do a lot more with these, but yeah, this is pretty basic. So that's what these are, and then the column names for these columns. When I have the constructor, I don't have the ID because it's auto-generated, and you saw that it automatically generates the number for me, and it starts at 1. And this is basically the configuration, and that's how it outputs. So just take the first name and the last name, and it automatically generates the ID for me, so that's cool. Getters and setters for everything. So that's the entity, the test entity, and I specified this in the Hibernate. It's like the mapping, so I specified that with the properties, the Hibernate properties, in the data configuration. So back to the home, so that's when I pass this object back, that's what you see over here in red. So that's pretty much it. Again, just another form, and it will call test, and that'll be a test controller. So there's the test controller, and test controller request mapping. So test is called, and it's got to be a post, so it takes the post, and I need the request. So because post and data, so I need the first name and last name that was posted. Great. This is the model and view, and use the request, get parameters, and then create and persist the object. So test, new test object, pass first name and last name, and then I just pass that to the repository and save, and then that's it. The Hibernate test repository here, repository that was auto-wired. So and then I pass the test back with the model. So that's why I was able to use the EL when the model gets passed back. That's why this shows up after I submit. So yeah, that's that. And the user is just so I can create a user. I could make this into an entity, and but yeah, I didn't. As you saw the code, do I have it? So that's pretty much it for the test. Hibernate employee test. So yeah, thanks for watching.